We're here back in the studio. Everything's working here in the studio, which is good. I am hopped up on energy drinks this morning because it is a Monday morning, and the energy drink it was a blue raspberry. And you know, if the flavor it has a color, then you know it's extremely artificial. So I'm really hyped up. It's like the only color that should really be a flavor is orange, but you'll have like white cherry, blue raspberry. That's when you know you're in artificial land. And I've got a lot of it in me, so we're going to have a great show here today. And what I want to focus on for our main story this morning is the Trump trial. So it's a big week in the Trump trial because prosecutors said on Friday that they plan to call only 2 more witnesses in Donald Trump's criminal trial, and they could actually rest their case by the end of those week. And one of those final 2 witnesses will be Trump's former lawyer, Michael Cohen, who is expected to testify this morning. In fact, just in just a little bit, he should be testifying. And that's what I want to focus today's story on is Michael Cohen, who he is, what the history is, and how does this case revolve around Michael Cohen? Because a lot of people talk about this case. You hear it over and over again, but nobody really knows. You don't hear really talking about, again, facts. What are the facts behind Michael Cohen? Because you don't hear that being said. It's just either you're for Trump or against Trump, and no one's really focusing on the facts of the case. So we're going to go a little bit over Michael Cohen, because Cohen's a late 2016 hush money payment to porn star Stormy Daniels is what's the heart of this trial in the Manhattan Supreme Court. And Supreme Court is their trial court in New York. So it's not like our Supreme Court here is our ultimate appellate court in Mississippi. The Supreme Court in New York is actually their trial court. So let's talk a little bit about Michael Cohen, because he's quite an interesting fellow, to say the least. So let's start with a little background on Michael Cohen. So Cohen has actually been a Democrat for almost his whole life, with the only exception being from 2002 to 2004, when he unsuccessfully ran as a Republican for the New York City Council. Not a great idea to run for a Republican in the New York City Council, but of course he was defeated. And from 2017 to 2018, when he worked for the Trump administration, when Trump was first elected president. And he famously stated that he voted for Barack Obama. He said he was disappointed, but he said he did, in fact, vote for Barack Obama. But despite him being a Democrat, he started working, he kind of joined the Trump organization in late 2006. And before that, he was a personal injury attorney he started in 1992. So Cohen got involved in Trump when he was a condo board member in a Trump building and got involved on Trump's side of a resident versus management dispute. So he lived in a condo, I believe it was in the Trump Tower. He had a bunch of his family living there in the Trump Tower. And he essentially, when there was an argument between the management of the Trump Tower with the condos there and the residents, he took Trump's side. And after that is when Trump brought him in to his company. And in 2011, so he started working with Trump. He essentially became the attorney of Trump. He was doing a bunch of things for Trump and the Trump organization with lawsuits and putting down other defamation and things like that. And in a 2011 interview, so this is quite a long time before Trump was even running for president. This is his apprentice days. In a 2011 interview with ABC News, Cohen stated, quote, "If someone does something Mr. Trump doesn't like, I do everything in my power to resolve it to Mr. Trump's benefit. If you do something wrong, I'm going to come at you, grab you by the neck, and I'm not going to let you go until I'm finished." That's a quote he told ABC News back in 2011. So this brings us up to 2016, when Stormy Daniels, whose legal name is Stephanie Clifford, was speaking to some reporters and said that she had a sexual affair with Trump in 2006. In October, Cohen and Daniels' attorney, Keith Davidson, negotiated a non-disclosure agreement, an NDA, under which she was to be paid $130,000. And Cohen created a Delaware LLC called Essential Consultants and used it to pay the $130,000. This arrangement was reported by the Wall Street Journal in January of 2018. So that's what the Wall Street Journal said. In a minute, we're going to go over his guilty plea and what was kind of said throughout that. Cohen told the New York Times in February 2018 that he paid the $130,000 from his own pocket. He also said the payment was not a campaign contribution, and he was not reimbursed by either the Trump organization or the Trump campaign. The Washington Post later noted that by stating he used his own money to, quote, facilitate the payment. So Cohen actually initiated a private arbitration case against Daniels in February of 2018 based on the NDA signed by Daniels in October of 2016. Cohen actually obtained an order from an arbiter barring Daniels from publicly discussing her alleged relationship with Trump. Then, in August of 2018, when Trump was still president, Cohen pled guilty to 5 counts of willful tax evasion, 1 count of making false statements to a bank, 1 count of causing an unlawful campaign contribution, and 1 count of making excessive campaign contribution, all of which were felonies, and some of them involved things against his veracity, which can become very important in his cross-examination, which we're going to talk about in just a second. And that plea was entered following the filing of an 8-count criminal information, that's essentially charging him in the federal system, which alleged that Cohen concealed more than $4 million in personal income from the IRS, made false statements to a federally insured financial institution in connection with a $500,000 home equity loan, and in 2016 caused $280,000 in payments to be made to 2 women, Stormy Daniels, as well as Karen McDougal, which we're going to talk about a little bit in a second, to 2 women who otherwise planned to speak publicly about their alleged affairs with candidate Trump, who was a candidate at the time. At the time, the attorney for the United States, Robert Kuzmani, so the federal prosecutor, said Michael Cohen is a lawyer who, rather than setting an example of respect for the law, instead chose to break the law repeatedly over many years and in a variety of ways. His day of reckoning serves as a reminder that we are a nation of laws with one set of rules that applies equally to everyone. And it's very important to note here that this was in August of 2018. That's when Trump was in the presidency. So this is not something where Trump was trying to hide what Cohen was doing or trying to prevent the prosecution of him. In fact, it was his Department of Justice that actually went after Cohen. And this is going to be important a little bit later on because essentially it goes, when you prosecute someone in your own administration, it goes to show that, again, that maybe you're not hiding something when you're going after this guy. And it becomes important because this is when the break between Cohen and Trump happened, which will be important in just a second. Now, the FBI Assistant Director in Charge, William F. Sweeney Jr. said, quote, "This investigation uncovered crimes of fraud, deception, and invasion conducted through a string of financial transactions that were carefully constructed and concealed protect a variety of interests. But as we all know, the truth can only remain hidden for so long before the FBI brings it to light." Man, what a day it used to be when the FBI actually did bring things to light instead of becoming a police wing of the Democratic Party. That's neither here nor there. It was actually a great organization under the Trump when Trump was president, and actually used to investigate people, even people that used to work for the Trump. But it's neither here nor there. Continuing on with his statement, he said, "We are all expected to follow the rule of law, and the public expects us, the FBI, to enforce the law equally. Today, Mr. Cohen has been reminded of this important lesson as he acknowledged with his guilty plea." So again, this wasn't a contested case. This is Cohen admitting to his guilt of what he did. And it's interesting to see what he was actually found guilty of. So what we're going to do, we're going to take a quick break right here, our first break. And when we get back, I'm going to discuss in detail exactly, not everything he pled guilty of, but the stuff that he pled guilty of that's relating to Donald Trump and Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal, because that's the nature of what the case is going on in Manhattan right now. So we're going to go over it because, again, that's what they brought charges, and why the federal government or the federal prosecutors never did bring Trump into it, because there's very important facts in here that show how crazy this case is against Trump. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back here to The Full Story on WYAB 103.9. And I just want to put it out there that, again, you can find all of our episodes here, if you can't catch it in the morning, on regulatorsproductions.com/The Full Story, or you just go to the regular website, click on The Full Story. You got all the episodes there, as well as videos from the show if you want to see I do have the face for radio, so you may not want to see the videos. But there are some videos up there of me, of us here presenting these stories. Some of the highlights from the show. Not every show has a video, but you can catch those up there as well. And then next I want to move to, we're talking about Michael Cohen. And I want to move to the facts behind what he pled guilty to. Because you hear a lot of the facts reported by a lot of the news agencies, but you can't really trust them, right? But this here, again, I've always told you that here at The Full Story, we're about facts, right? What are the actual facts? So the best thing you can look at for facts is what he said under oath, what he was found guilty of when he had to plead guilty, which the judge found him competent of. So what are those facts that were presented that he pled guilty to and actually serve time for, because that's what's going to make the difference, right? So that's the facts we need to look at. So here's what it is. So in early 2016, this all came out during the guilty plea, what he pled guilty to. So in early 2016, Cohen arranged for former Playboy model Karen McDougal to be paid $150,000 by the publisher of the supermarket tabloid, the National Enquirer, which is never really known for its great journalism, right? It's ethical journalism. Not really the beacon of ethical journalism, the National Enquirer. But essentially, he arranged through that magazine and the attorney for Karen McDougal to essentially quash the story. It's a practice known as catch and kill in the journalism industry. So essentially what happens is the reporter or someone, or an editor in this case from the magazine, reaches out to an attorney and says, hey, we have this person who's going to say some bad things about your guy. If you pay us so much money, we are not going to publish it, right? Pay us and the person so much money, we are not going to publish it. Another very common example is paying the person themselves, or essentially buying the rights to that person. So that's essentially the agreement they had with the National Enquirer. And in order to make these payments, Cohen created a shell entity called Resolution Consultants, LLC. And on August 5th, 2016, he entered into an agreement with McDougal to acquire her limited life rights to the story of her relationship with, quote, any then married man in exchange for $150,000. And as well as a commitment to feature her on 2 magazine covers and publish more than 100 magazine articles authored by her. Despite the cover and article features of the agreement, its principal purpose, as understood by those involved, including Cohen, was to suppress McDougal's story so as to prevent it from influencing the election. So just essentially prevent her, essentially from her saying what relationship she had with Trump. According to that guilty plea, that was what's understood by all. But you also kind of understand the motivations for these women that had these alleged relationships with Trump, right? They're more than willing to take money, or is more than willing to get featured in other magazine articles, right, that they want to do. Now, between late August 2016 and September 2016, Cohen agreed with the chairman of the National Enquirer to assign the rights to the non-disclosure portion of the entity agreement with McDougal to Cohen for $125,000. So essentially, the National Enquirer said, hey, we'll publish the articles. The NDA portion is going to go to Cohen if Cohen pays $125,000. However, in early October of 2016, after the assignment agreement was signed, but before Cohen had paid the $125,000, the chairman of the National Enquirer contacted Cohen and told him, in substance, that the deal was off and Cohen should tear up the assignment agreement. Now, again, all of these facts are according to the Department of Justice. This is where I got this. I got this from the Department of Justice's website. So this is almost the exact words they put out. And then on October 8th of 2016, an agent from Stormy Daniels informed the editor of the National Enquirer and that Daniels was willing to make public statements and confirm on the record of her alleged past affair with Trump. So you had one woman who contacted National Enquirer. He kind of set up some payments for that. And now you have Stormy Daniels, who informed the National Enquirer that she also had a relationship with Trump. The chairman and the editor of the National Enquirer then contacted Cohen and put him in touch with Daniels' attorney, who, coincidentally, was also representing McDougal. So you have this attorney who's representing both of these women, who's also working out these payments. And then over the course of the next few days, Cohen negotiated a $130,000 agreement with Daniels' attorney to himself to purchase Daniels' silence, and received a signed confidential settlement agreement and a separate side letter agreement with Daniels' attorney. Now, this is all going in the background. You haven't even heard Trump's name a single time. That's important. Now, Cohen did not immediately execute the agreement, nor did he pay Daniels. On the evening of October 25th, 2016, with no deal with Daniels finalized, Daniels' attorney told the editor of the National Enquirer that Daniels was close to completing a deal with another outlet to make her story public. The editor of the National Enquirer, in turn, texted Cohen that, quote, "We have to coordinate something on the matter Daniels calling you about, or it could look awfully bad for everyone." So this, again, this editor of the National Enquirer, they're essentially acting as almost an intermediary between Daniels and Cohen. Again, very respectable news agency the National Enquirer is. The chairman and editor of the National Enquirer then called Cohen through an encrypted telephone application. Cohen agreed to make the payment and then called Daniels' attorney to finalize the deal. The next day, on October 26, 2016, Cohen emailed an incorporating service to obtain the corporate formation documents for another shell corporation, Essential Consultants, LLC, which Cohen had incorporated a few days prior. So he's got another shell corporation. He's got multiple ones going on. Later that afternoon, Cohen drew down $131,000 from the fraudulently obtained home equity line of credit, which is one of his other things he applied for. So essentially, he way overvalued his house and able to get a home equity loan. And part of that money, that was a $500,000 home equity loan. And as part of that loan, $130,000 of that home equity loan is what went to pay Stormy Daniels. And he had requested that $130,000 be deposited into a bank account Cohen had just opened in the name of Essential Consultants. The next morning, on October 27th, 2016, Cohen went to a bank and wired the approximately $130,000 from Essential Consultants to Daniels' attorney. So essentially, you got to kind of follow the money here, right? So home equity loan, he gets $500,000, $130,000 of that $500,000. He gets wired to his shell corporation. From that shell corporation, he then sends it to to Daniels' attorney, which then, of course, goes to Daniel. On the bank form to complete the wire, Cohen falsely indicated that the purpose of the wire being sent was, quote, retainer. Again, this is what he's saying. On November 1st, 2016, Cohen received from Daniels' attorney copies of the final signed confidential settlement agreement, and signed side letter agreement. So all these different agreements, side agreements. So what did he actually, what was the illegal part of this, right? So what did he actually get found guilty of? Because there's a lot of things that's been said, what's illegal, what's not illegal. So the payments themselves, right, not illegal. What he did with the National Enquirer, while completely blowing apart any kind of ethics in journalism, and of course there's no such thing, I think, as journalistic ethics anymore. It's one thing that I've always been, I think, has been lost on our media. But anyway, it's not unlawful to have no ethics. It's not unlawful to be immoral, which of course the National Enquirer, again, this is kind of stuff that they always do. I wouldn't be surprised that's how they made most of their money, is on these side agreements and not actually distribution of their magazine. But essentially, none of that was what was illegal, okay? So what was illegal was the fact that, A, he had this illegal home equity loan that he lied about. But two, the courts found that essentially what this $130,000 and the other payment, the $125,000 to the First Lady, what they essentially equaled to was an illegal or an unauthorized campaign contribution to Trump since it helped his election. So because he silenced these women, it helped Trump get elected. Therefore, it was essentially a campaign contribution that was way too high for the amount. Right? You're limited to how much you can give to a candidate, and this $130,000 and $125,000 was way over that limit. So essentially, it amounted to an illegal campaign contribution, and that is what he was found guilty of, was an illegal campaign contribution, in addition to the other IRS and home equity stuff, right? Now, Cohen is saying that Trump directed him to arrange the Daniels payment. He allegedly made recordings of Trump in which he and Trump spoke about the arrangement to pay McDougal through the National Enquirer. At one point in this alleged recording, Cohen told Trump, quote, "I need to open up a company for the transfer of all that info regarding our friend David." And that's a reference to David Pecker, who was the chairman mentioned earlier. He was the chairman of the National Enquirer. Trump then said, "What do we got to pay for this? $150." Again, the payments themselves are not illegal. Now today, Trump characterizes the attempts to get him to pay the money to the women to keep them quiet as extortion, which essentially it is. And Cohen then famously broke off from Trump in 2018 during, again, Trump's Department of Justice after the FBI raided Cohen's home and office, and Trump began to distance himself from Cohen. So essentially Trump's saying, these women, they were extorting me. And so therefore, Cohen on his own, which he said earlier, paid them. Now this amounted to an illegal campaign contribution. But again, what Trump's doing, right? Trump, regarding his knowledge or anything like that, that's not part of it. And again, it's important to note that the Department of Justice, and to this day, has not prosecuted him for anything in relation to that. Even Biden's Department of Justice hasn't prosecuted him for that. They've had some other crazy cases down in the Southern District of Florida, but not regarding this right here. And again, this is 2018 when Trump was president. If Trump had him investigated, right? And Trump could have been extremely crooked and said, "Hey, don't worry about Cohen." He could have pulled a Biden on that, right? How Biden treats his allies, right? Department of Justice, don't look at that. Look at something else, right? Look at my political rivals. But no, that's not what he did. He stayed out of the way of the Department of Justice. If Trump had done anything illegal, right? Why would he have allowed that to happen? Why would he ever allow the DOJ to arrest, prosecute, and eventually imprison Cohen? Now, afterwards, Cohen had a fallout with Donald Trump because, again, Donald Trump didn't hold back. Maybe Cohen thought he'd have maybe he thought that those payments would give him some kind of clout with the president, right? That works very well for the Clintons and the Bidens, does not work as well with Trump. Okay, we have to take another break right here. But when I would come back, what I want to discuss is how the cross-examination of Cohen can play out over the next few days. Because, again, you can imagine, I'm going to talk about how much this guy can be cross-examined through his biases and stuff like that. But keep it tuned here to WYAB 103.9, and we'll get back into this subject. And speaking of dark and gloomy, we're talking about the attorney, David Cohen. So I just want to continue as we're talking about him. Sorry, did I say David Cohen? I meant Michael Cohen. I don't know where I got David from. I was thinking about, I was reading about the statue of David just during the break. It was just an amazing piece of art. That's what it was kind of coming back to me. But we're talking about Michael Cohen and his dark and gloomy past and his dark and gloomy actions. And so that's essentially the facts I just told you, is essentially the facts that came out during the DOJ investigation, but more importantly, what actually came out during the guilty plea. Because a lot of stuff, again, is talked about, including by the Department of Justice, that doesn't pan out. But what does matter is what actually happens and what is actually proven in court. So everything I just told you is what was proven in court. Now I want to talk about the actual cross-examination of Cohen, because there's a lot of things he can be cross-examined on. So, as I talked about, he has several felony convictions now. Not only does he have those several felony convictions that I talked about, most of them, or a lot of them, are crimes against his truthfulness. So, under New York Rule of Evidence 6.19, the credibility of a witness may be impeached, and impeached means you attack their credibility. It may be impeached in a criminal proceeding by cross-examination about whether the witness has been convicted of a specified offense. In this case, all of his federal convictions, especially those of fraud, would fall under that. Now, under the New York New York case People v. Sandoval, it specifically stated that evidence of prior specific criminal, vicious, or immoral conduct, he falls under all three of those, he's got the trifecta actually, should be admitted if the nature of such conduct or the circumstances in which it occurred bear logically and reasonably on the issue of credibility. It added, commission of perjury or other crimes or acts of individual dishonesty or untrustworthiness, e.g., offenses involving theft or fraud, bribery, or acts of deceit, cheating, breach of trust, will usually have a very material relevance whenever committed. Doesn't even matter how long ago that they were. And in this case, it was not that long ago, 2016. So essentially, what this rule says is that those who have been convicted of crimes are inherently less credible, and this is more so in the case of crimes involving veracity or truthfulness. That makes sense, right? If a person has a crime of fraud or deceit, he is much more likely to be deceitful on the stand. This is a big problem from Cohen, because he was convicted of tax evasion, one count of making false statements, I mean, that's right there, lying to a bank, one count of causing an unlawful campaign contribution, and one count of making excessive campaign contribution. To say he has some baggage is an understatement. Additionally, under Rule 6.15, a witness may be impeached by a prior inconsistent statement. So what that says is that whatever he says in court today, if he has made an inconsistent statement about what he is testifying, you can impeach him, you can challenge him on that prior inconsistent statement. So, and he has a lot of those. So let's talk about some of them. So in February of 2018, Cohen told the New York Times that he paid Daniels $130,000 out of his own pocket, which is consistent with what he pled guilty to. So not only his statements to the New York Times, his statements to when he pled guilty, and specifically he told the New York Times, quote, neither the Trump organization nor the Trump campaign was a party to the transaction with Miss Clifford, that's Stormy Daniels' real last name, and neither reimbursed me for the payment either directly or indirectly. The payment to Ms. Clifford was lawful and was not a campaign contribution or a campaign expenditure by anyone. Cohen said that he had given a similar statement to the Federal Election Commission in response to a complaint filed by the government watchdog group Common Cause. And moreover, Cohen raised new questions about his credibility while testifying last fall in Trump's civil fraud trial. During a cross-examination, he answered some questions with a lawyerly objection, or asked and answered, which is very unusual for a witness to say those things. That's usually resolved for the attorneys, and Cohen is in fact disbarred from New York. Cohen insisted he was not quite guilty of tax evasion or the loan application falsehood. Ultimately, he testified that he lied to the federal judge, the one who found him guilty, who took his plea. So then he lied about lying. This guy, it's just one thing after another. You got the convictions, you have all of these prior inconsistent statements. And I'll tell you, as a prosecutor, if I was going against a witness that I know had several inconsistent statements, which is true for a lot of people, especially when you're cross-examining an accused, you go by statement by statement. And I'll tell you, normally it's hard to get some of these because it's, hey, a statement they told to a friend, or it's a statement they may have said in passing to someone. But this guy told it to the New York Times, right? It doesn't get much better than that, ladies and gentlemen, for a prior inconsistent statement. And not only did he tell it to the New York Times, he told it to the Federal Election Commission, and he told it to a federal judge, right? That doesn't get much better in the prior inconsistent statement world. You just don't get any better when cross-examining a witness. That's just gold if you're an attorney to just go at this. And I would surely hope that Trump's attorneys go after him hard on all these things. But not only can you impeach someone on prior inconsistent statement, you can impeach them on their prior convictions, especially when they have to deal with veracity. You can also impeach them on bias against an individual. In this case, Cohen's bias against Trump. And since he was released from jail, he started a podcast called Mea Culpa, essentially, hey, my fault, right? And wrote a memoir. He has cast himself as an avatar of anti-Trump sentiment. He is like the lead front. He's so anti-Trump, right? Because, in fact, in social media, as the trial opened, he used a pretty bad nickname for Trump, taunting him to, quote, keep whining, crying, and violating the gag order, you petulant defendant. That's what he said to Trump, right? Literally just days before the trial. Again, it's very hard sometimes to get biased, to impeach someone on bias against someone, because it's usually not very clear, right? This guy is directly saying things bad about Trump, which is very easy to impeach him on. In addition, and an interesting forward to his memoir, he wrote a memoir, of course, he even stated that some people see him as, quote, the least reliable narrator on the on the planet. The least reliable narrator on the planet. I mean, just wow, right? So, this guy, he just has everything, right? If you're someone impeaching him, this is like the textbook example in law school of someone you can impeach, because he has impeachment on all three things: prior inconsistent statement, conviction, as well as bias. He hits the trifecta on impeachment. So it's going to be a beautiful day when Trump's attorneys get to cross-examine Cohen. So in other words, Cohen is the worst possible witness for a prosecutor. And that is even if the prosecutor was an honest prosecutor trying to do the right thing, right? But you add a dishonest shyster like Cohen with an unethical prosecutor like Bragg, and you have the worst concoction of the criminal justice system. But then again, maybe Cohen and Bragg are perfect for each other. And this is the witness. This is what blows my mind, ladies and gentlemen. This is the witness that the prosecution is hanging its hat on for their case against a former president. Now, I'm all for it. Don't get me wrong. I'm all for prosecuting a former president, and there are at least one that I think we should. And I do not believe anyone is above the law. But if you're going to prosecute a prior president, right, a former president, you have to have your ducks in a row and do it right. Well, I mean, I guess I say you should have that for anybody you prosecute, but especially in something that's high profile, everybody's looking down on you, and you know they're going to have good defense attorneys. It is an honor and a privilege to be a prosecutor. You get to serve the people of your community, to make them and their families safer from dangerous criminals and corrupt politicians. It really is very satisfying to be a prosecutor. But the New York City DA's office is making a mockery of this position by putting people up there like Cohen, who has no actual prosecutor would ever want to put this guy up as a witness unless they absolutely had to. And this is the person that their case completely rests on, which is why it's going to fall apart.